Alright, so I'm your teacher. I'm going to be teaching you about human and invasive species impact on coral reef biodiversity. I want you to take a look at this image for me. What do you see? Um, just what colors do you see on the screen? So, yeah, you might say there's not much color. It's very, just kind of white. Might be a little bits of color here and there. Might be some fish in the background with some color. Well, that white stuff there is coral. And what color would you normally expect that to be? Like, you think it would be like all the colors of the rainbow, like, reds, blues, greens, whatever. Most of the time coral is pretty colorful. So, do you think that this coral is still alive? Or do you see anything else? Do you see anything in this photo that looks alive? I know there's some fish back there in the background, but for the most part, I'd say that most of the things here are no longer living. But also on the fish, would you say that's like the normal amount of fish you would think you would see on like a coral reef? Or would you say that's like a lot less than normal? So there's not a lot of fish. Everything kind of looks dead. So what do you think caused everything to die? Well, that's what we're going to try to figure out today. So we're going to now explore a coral reef that has an abundance of life, is healthy, everything is in balance, and we will explore what happens when we disrupt that balance. So, alright, so there's this QR code here. I want you to scan. It'll take you to a gizmo, and you'll log in using the credentials I gave you at the beginning of the year. And I will now navigate to that, and we'll see what happens when we kind of disrupt the balance a little bit. Don't need to worry about that. All right, not. Okay. Alright, so we got a healthy coral reef here. We got a lot of things we can do. We can mess with the ocean conditions. We can mess with the land use. We can mess with how much fishing is done. We can mess with what diseases are in the environment. And we can mess with like what invasive species we have in here. Alright, so let's start. We'll start with land use. So, let's see what happens when we set like. Well, let's get a base test. Let's get a base and see, like, just what happens when it's at normal. So, there's several things we can look at. We can look at okay, how does the population change over time in comparison to like the normal population? We can turn on many different things. Maybe we'll just do one coral. We'll worry about those guys later. We can do that. That. Just give us some things to look at. Yeah. Yeah. Then the summary over here tells us like what condition the ocean, our reef environment is in, how many fish we have, how much stress is being put on like the different animals and whatnot, what's their pH, ocean temperature, what's the storm severity rate, a bunch of things here that is just like some normal conditions. So let's see what happens when we run it for like 10 years just on normal. So, summary says that pretty much everything's still healthy. our data says that everything's pretty much in balance of where it normally should be. So, that's just what happens normally. Alright. Alright. Let's look at lodging. What percent do we want to set that at? Let's set it pretty fairly high. At like 70%. And let's just do that. Let's see what happens. So again, only advance for like 10 years or so. Alright. Anything you notice change about our environment before we go look at our summaries and stuff? So we got like coral and stuff here, got fish, another type of fish, sponges or these things right here, got some algae, grouper, might be a turtle somewhere in there. I don't see a turtle. Alright, so looks like from this that coral's kind of under stress. Oof. Alright. See, turtles are down, coral is going down, sponges are going down, algae's going up, some fish are going up, urchins are going up. So, some things are doing good, some things are doing bad. Let's reset and change it up a bit. So maybe we'll bring this back down, maybe like 40 or something like that. Let's set everything here at 40, and we'll see what happens. Alright, what happened to our coral and everything? Who did it? It was me, yeah. So, yeah, looks like, would you say this is healthy? It's kind of like what our image looked like, very barren. We can look at the data if you want to see what it looks like. There's a fish. Okay, all is well. All is well. Staghorn coral has died out. That's great. So yeah, pretty much everything is not doing good. Some of our fish started to do good at first, but now they're not doing good. So, yeah. Anything else you noticed? There's another fish. Okay, yeah. Looks like we know this caused everything to die, so we can drop these down a little bit. Like, let's set these at like 10 or so. We'll keep it like this. We'll see what happens. Alright. Let's go. Alright. Anything you immediately notice happen? Seems like algae are going up. Things are starting to die off, but maybe not as rapidly, so I guess our conditions aren't as severe. Let's reset, and now we're going to see what happens with fishing. So we can like do like overall net fishing versus like fishing for a specific species versus like, yeah. So maybe we'll bring net fishing down all the way, and we'll say, what happens if like we really say we don't like grouper, or actually we really like grouper. Grouper's really tasty, so we're gonna try catch them all. Let's see what happens. Alright, summary. So, algae started to go high. Clearly we missed one. Let's see. So our snapper population went really high up. Don't know why that would be. Let's look at grouper. Grouper ain't doing good. They ain't doing good. A lot of things aren't doing good. Some things are. What is doing real good? Sea turtles? Any ideas on why sea turtles and snapper would be doing pretty good in these conditions? I don't know. Let's just say we're trying to catch everything. Gotta catch them all. But let's set it a little bit lower. Let's see what happens. That ain't good. I just see one little fish. We still got some coral, so it's better than the last time everything was basically dead. Still some sponges here and a lot of algae. Algae seems to do really good when like things start dying off or whatever. But yeah, pretty much everything's not doing good. Except for our algae. I wonder if there's any way for us to like say like specifically target algae. Some coral diseases. I don't think so. I don't know. Let's look at invasive species. We're going to now introduce some red lionfish, and we're going to see what effect that has on our population. So, our biodiversity here. So let's advance. Well, I see a lot of these guys. That's a lionfish. So there's about 400 of these guys here. So seems like they killed off a lot of the fish. Algae again went up high. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. A lot of our fish are dying out, and lionfish are going way on up there. Kind of reached a peak point though. Interesting. Alright. Let's do one more of these. So, we're now going to introduce crown of the foreign starfish, and we're going to run this thing until it causes our populations of coral to die out completely. So I want you to make a prediction of how long do you think it will take for introducing this new species to wipe out all the coral. You can write that down in the notes or whatever, and then later on you'll get a worksheet that you can open up and you can write down your prediction in there, and I will look at that later on. Alright, so get your predictions in. Let's see what happens. Still got some coral. Alright, anyone said 10? We still got coral, so we're still good. Wait a minute, what happened to our starfish? Okay, coral's gone. That's a sponge. Let's see if the data supports that, or if we need to go farther. We'll just look at coral, because that's what we care about now. Seems pretty conclusive that coral are pretty much dead. So if you said 19, congratulations. We'll find out why all these impacts are happening to our biodiversity in a little bit. So let's go back to here. So let's talk about some terminology I used, some terminology that Gizmo used, and reasons why these things are happening. So you may know what several of these terms are. We got overfishing, overlodging, and eutrophication. Um, some of these are pretty obvious what they are. Overfishing, overlodging, that's just where we're taking too much fish out of the environment. We're, destroying our rainforest and whatnot. So, like, if you remember in the Gizmo, when we, like, did very high levels of fishing, it, like, caused everything to die out, basically. And even when we did logging, it kind of had less of an effect on our ocean environment, but it still had a effect. And these like rainforests are major homes for a lot of life. A lot of biodiversity is in those rainforests, and when we cut down those rainforests, we first off you know we lose some of our planet's ability to be able to like turn greenhouse gases back into oxygen, which we need. But we also destroy the homes of lots of animals and lots of life. Eutrophication is probably a term you haven't heard before, but have you ever like gone to like a lake or a pond and you see like just a lot of like gunk on the top, like a lot of green gunk, kind of like this photo right over here on our left? So that's the effect of eutrophication. So it's when like a lot of like nutrients and stuff that like algae need to survive are pumped into the environment. Either like a massive die out event happens, and so there's a lot for them to feed off of, or like via runoff, which is when like rain takes the chemicals that farmers put on like their land, like their pesticides and whatnot, and it goes into local rivers, which end up in ponds, lakes, and the ocean. But when all those like chemicals that the algae use to feed on like gets pumped into the environment a overly amount, then their populations skyrocket and they cover the entire surface of the body of water, which prevents sunlight from being able to reach down to the plants and whatnot that's on the bottom, which causes them to die out. And then the bacteria, the algae will feed off of that, and they will it'll just expedite the process. They'll just keep on growing and growing and growing until there's no more nutrients left, and then they'll all die out, and then you just have like a barren you basically have like a barren wasteland. There's no life. So kind of maybe that's what happened in our photo here. There's no life there. Another thing that we can talk about is like the different impact species can have on our biodiversity and our balance. So we have several terms here: keystone species, invasive species, native species, endemic species, indicator species. Some of these are, again, kind of more obvious what they are. You might have heard of some of these before, but we'll go for each one. So keystone species is like a species that is like keeps everything together, keeps everything from falling apart. If you've ever heard of like the keystone of like a bridge or something like that, like it kind of like goes in the middle and keeps the side from falling in. So it kind of like keeps the environment and the balance together. Some examples of these are like bison out on the plains, on what's left of our plains here in the United States. They will go and they'll eat lots of grass and lots of plant material that's out there, and they prevent grasses from getting too high and from trees from starting to grow, which helps to keep the environment how it is. It also helps prevent unnatural fires from like lots of plant material being there. There's less fuel for the fire, so it doesn't it doesn't spread out or is not as severe. So they can have a immense impact on the environment, and their absence has a immense impact. So you might try to think of like what are some things from our gizmo that were you might consider to be keystone species. Like what was something that when we took out, it like caused everything to kind of fall apart. Invasive species are like this lionfish that we introduced. They are not native. They're not from that environment. They're not supposed to be there in a sense, or they haven't been there they are not established in that environment. So like lionfish are a good example. There's lots of like like large snakes being released in Florida that would be considered invasive species, and they have like their own like things that they eat, things that eat them in their home environment. But when they're brought somewhere else, they don't have those predators, and they find something else to eat. But sometimes things struggle to eat them, so they kind of put the balance all out of whack. Native species are whatever you expect to find out in your environment. So here where I live, might expect to find some deer or raccoons or things that are supposed to be here in a sense, things that have been here for a while. That doesn't mean that species don't move around, over a large period of time, but it's like more like when it happens very rapidly that, it would be considered invasive. Endemic is kind of like native, like they're supposed to be there, but instead of them being found there, but they're also found like all over the world, like deer are found, in lots of places, lots of continents, but like on Madagascar, there's a lot of endemic species that are only found there, like lemurs and fusa and stuff, different animals. There's lots of animals, especially on the islands, that like are endemic to that island. They only live there. And then indicator species are species that like are good indicators of how healthy the environment is. So like if I were to go out into a stream and I might look for micro invertebrates, they're just kind of like little little bug-like things that live in the water, and usually their biodiversity is a good indicator of like how healthy the stream is, because they are very easily impacted by like pollutants and things that get dumped into the water. So they're usually a good indicator of like how healthy our environment is. Alright, well, with that knowledge, we're going to I'm going to give you a chance to look through your own gizmo. So this QR on the left will take you to a gizmo. It's called like forest biodiversity, and then on the right is like your worksheet that goes along with that. I can show you what those things look like. So here's our forest gizmo. Here's your worksheet. It has your name, date. Has a couple questions for you to answer. And you can play around with things on here and try to answer the questions on your worksheet. You can play with a lot of things like, will you allow hunting and logging? How much population of bears, mushrooms, trees, and deer will you put in there? Things like that. So you go work on that, you pause this video, and then when you're done, come back. I'll be here, and we'll move on to the next part. Alright, so hopefully you went into that and didn't just skip through, because that will be an important part of your grade. Well, now I have this quiz for you to do. I'll show you what it looks like. Again, you scan the QR, it'll take you to quiz. Alright, so on this quiz, you'll be asked several things, things that I went over in my lecture, so if you're paying attention, you should get all this right. Yeah. What's your name? You can put whatever. I just need something for the data analysis. But yeah, so do this quiz, then come back here. I'll give you a little bit to do that. Pause the video. Then we'll get ready to wrap up. Alright, so hopefully you went into that quiz. Alright, so looking back at our first photo that we looked at, what do you think caused everything to die? I asked you that question before, but now that you've now that you've learned more about the human impact on coral reefs and invasive species impact on coral reefs, I want you to answer, what do you think caused everything to die? You can write down your worksheet if it's not on there. Yeah. Also, we talk about a lot in our lives about, like, let's save the sea turtle, let's not, buy plastic straws, let's, have our own cups or whatever, our own, drink cups or whatever. I have this one right here. So what are some things that we can do in our daily lives that can, reduce our impact on the environment? Like, there are things that we can do, like we can recycle more, we can like use less water when we do things like take a shower or brush our teeth. And there are ways to reduce our water consumption. Yeah, what do you think are some things that you can do in your daily life that can help to reduce your impact on the environment? Well, hope you enjoyed today's lesson. I will see you back next week. And I hope you have a good weekend. Alright. Bye, y'all.